as students have 1 hour to ourselves. And I want to encourage my colleagues that in this 1 hour, it's very important that we share ideas. At this point, I want to say that no one will penalize you for giving your opinion. It's just that we will have to discuss your opinion, just like we discuss my own opinion. But it's very important that you participate in any way you can, so that we make our 1 hour meaningful and useful to us. I want to thank all the students from different parts of the university country, different parts of Africa. I see universities from different parts of the of Africa and other parts of the world. You are all very welcome. You'll notice that the previous weeks we've been looking at data and data management, and we have actually been recently we looked at data analysis and specifically trying to interpret the key statistics that are usually generated that are of interest. Today, I want to break a bit and take us back to, again, refresh our minds with a lecture on navigating the PhD terrain. And so I want to invite you now to listen to this lecture. I know probably some of you have listened to it on YouTube. Some people could have downloaded it and have it in your laptops, but that does not really cause any harm if we listen to it again. So allow me share with you this video, and then we be able to watch together and pick 1 or 2 things that may help us in our journey as PhD students. Just give me a few seconds as I try to work within these 2 gadgets I have. Because of network issues, I try to work with 2 gadgets. Yes, someone confirmed to me that you can get my sound here and also see what I'm sharing.
Yes, I can get you very well from Kenya.
Okay, thank you.
You are waiting to see what will unfold on the PhD program. Now, on this program, you will be able to learn a number of things, and I hope the things that you are going to learn will certainly help you in your daily activities, and these things will change the way you have been thinking over the years. So in this lecture of the PhD seminar series, you will be required to read a number of books, and I'm giving them to you as a reference text for this particular workshop that we are having. I want you to read the book by Blackster Hughes and Tite, 1998. That is the Academic Career Handbook. I want you to read another book by Bowen, and that is 1992, In Pursuit of the PhD program. And this is published by Princeton, New Jersey, Princeton University Press. I want you to read the book Lovitz, 1996, Leaving the Ivory Tower, a sociological analysis of the causes of departure from doctoral study. And of course, this is published by the University of Michigan, ladies and gentlemen. There's another book I want you to read, which is Sykes, 1988. And this is Profscam, Professors and the Demise of Higher Education, Washington, D.C., Reagan Gateway. Now, those are just a few of the books that I've highlighted, but certainly we are going to put all these books somewhere as your reading list, and you'll be able to access the material that you need. So, as I said earlier on, welcome to the PhD program. Welcome to the community of scholars. Welcome to the PhD bench. Not yet on the bench, but I know that you want to join. Therefore, welcome, and I'm sure you can still see the bench just far away from you, but you'll be there anyway very soon. So, I'm certainly welcoming you to the program, and I'll begin by giving you the introduction. I want to introduce you to these PhD workshops. Right. Remember, our topic today is getting a sense of the PhD terrain. You need to understand the terrain, right? It's no use for you to go out to the battlefield without understanding the terrain. If you don't understand the terrain, then you'll be badly hit and you'll be defeated. So these PhD workshops that will be facilitating will serve as a guide for you to progress in your planning, in your writing, and defending your PhD thesis. Now, these workshops as well aim at grounding you in the functional areas of business in which you intend to undertake a PhD. And therefore, these may include, but not limited to the ones I'm going to mention, marketing, financial economics, auditing and investigation, entrepreneurship and management, training, human growth and development, supply chain management, name it, HR in general, organizational behavior, that kind of thing. So these workshops intend to ground you in your areas where you intend to undertake your PhD, and also to tell you what others have gone through, the experiences that have been shared by other people that you are following. Now, of course, in this case, a case could be made that doctoral students are required to be the most rigorous researchers. And I want you to bear this at the back of your mind, because if you don't, you'll get a shock of your life. So as researchers, right, you are expected to be resourceful, seeking information in a wide array of sites. And as a participant of these workshops, you're a researcher, and you know that very well. Writing your doctoral thesis will supplement material or materials available at your university. And what you are going to write will not supplant any institutional documents or explanatory requirements. So this is very important. So try to read, while at the university, try to read all publications from your university which enumerate the steps in the PhD process, as well as any academic calendars which might offer clues about mandated activities, ladies and gentlemen. Also get to know their frequency of occurrence, whether these will occur once in a semester, or they will occur monthly or weekly or annually. Try to also get to know the activities, the PhD activities, which may include maybe PhD alumni, attending class, coursework papers and presentations, preliminary examinations, developing and submitting PhD concept papers. All of those things are certainly articulated in those documents that are available at the university. So if you will be sitting coursework papers, all of that will be made known to you. The presentations you'll be making in class, preliminary examinations that you have to go through. If you are required to develop and submit PhD concept papers, still that information is contained in documents that are kept at the university. Developing and submitting PhD, presenting your PhD proposals, again, all these things are articulated, including developing and submitting your proposals, undertaking a pilot study, and the requirements for you to proceed to the next level after defending your pilot study results, and so forth, including the oral defenses. Now, of course, as I've already said, try to familiarize yourself with the university and get hold of any document that you think is very relevant. The university graduate handbook is a good starting point, but it doesn't stop there. You can start from there, look at the university website, go to the university website, and more so to the graduate school section, right? You have information, or even your department website. Look for brochures, the pamphlets and flyers. Look at the university board notices. You can look at the writings and advertisements in the campus newspapers and program newsletters. So make sure that you do not ignore any document that is produced by the university, because there might be important messages for you which you should not lose sight of. You can also explore the materials available from the graduate office. You can go to the office of the Dean of Graduate Studies or Dean of Graduate Research Studies, depending on the terminology that is being used in your university. And all these will describe the requirements that you will be going through. Inquire about the PhD program meetings, inquire about the informal gatherings, inquire about the community or practice meetings if you have them. Then again, look for advertisement materials which may offer a map of what to expect at the university. So in these workshops, as I've already told you, of course, emphasizing now these aspects, there are two objectives of these workshops. First and foremost is to provide an overview of the PhD terrain, because I want you to understand the PhD terrain and of course an explanation of all the steps in the process of writing a PhD thesis. And then second, we shall be providing a step-by-step guide to writing your PhD thesis proposals and prepare you for oral defense, ladies and gentlemen. Now, there are 4 major components for our PhD workshop, which correspond to the several stages involved in one, advancing a thesis, because as a PhD student, you will be developing your arguments from time to time, and then you will certainly advance those arguments. Therefore, I will take you through those aspects of advancing your thesis, developing and successfully defending a PhD proposal. If you are not required to write a concept paper at this stage, because you already admitted you get into the PhD proposal. But I know that especially on many taught programs, you begin with a concept paper, and then certainly you proceed on the proposal. But the concept paper stage could also be missed out. So the workshops that I'm giving you will take you through so that you understand how to advance your argument, develop successfully, and defend your proposal, because you must defend your proposal. Do not think that you just write anything and submit and then wait for feedback to be told that you go to the field. No, this is your document. Then, of course, the other aspect is developing research instrument, because after the proposal, you must develop instruments, and you must validate these instruments. Then you must write and defend your pilot study results. And then, of course, lastly, and this is the 5th element, writing and defending your PhD thesis, ladies and gentlemen. So initially, you will certainly go through these aspects I've already told you, getting a sense of the PhD terrain, preparing your PhD research, and doing your PhD research study. So why don't we then go to starting a PhD thesis journey. Now, I just want to remind you that nothing you have done in your academic career is quite like writing a PhD thesis, ladies and gentlemen. And we usually get a challenge, especially when you receive a new cohort of PhD students, and these students have in their minds a thinking that a PhD is an extension of a master's thesis or master's dissertation. And I want to say that is a mistaken view, and that's why I'm telling you that nothing you have done in your academic career is quite like writing a PhD thesis. But there are resemblances to coursework papers, certainly, and there are certain things that we can learn from the coursework papers that we can actually transfer to the PhD. But at this level, remember, you will be required to unlearn some of the things that you have learned over time. You will be required to learn afresh, and then later on to relearn, ladies and gentlemen. So, drawing on a wealth of experiences with the coursework papers that you have already done, you will be able to utilize that knowledge and expedite your PhD thesis writing. You have a considerable familiarity with writing coursework. I know that very well because you've written many papers and you've sat many exams and you have made a number of presentations, even the previous semesters or modules on your PhD program. For those who are undertaking a taught PhD program, you have written papers and you've presented those papers in the class in form of workshops, right? So there is some bit of considerable familiarity with what you are doing. With those proficiencies of writing coursework papers in place, it is now useful to bring them to a level of consciousness. Now, writing a coursework paper entails not only writing per se, but necessitates extensive reading and learning. And this is what you are going to do prior to and during the writing process, because reading is very important and searching for materials is also quite important. So the same holds true for your PhD thesis. Your learning and understanding of the topic, right, you are studying will be magnified many times in the process of writing your PhD thesis if you read widely and also consult widely. So writing a coursework paper promotes learning, as does writing a PhD thesis. But in the process of writing your PhD thesis, you learn many things. You learn more about your discipline. You learn more about writing to an audience beyond the one professor who taught the course, extending to your PhD thesis committee, and ultimately your academic discipline globally. So do not forget that you'll be given a doctoral committee that will give you guidance to successfully undertake your PhD and complete. So you are not writing to your professor alone, right? So the professor that taught you a particular module is not the only person who is going to judge the quality of your PhD. The members of the doctoral committee have a say in your work. And also the international, what you call the scholarly audience, have something to do. And that's why there is a requirement that before you graduate, probably on your PhD program, you must have published 2 papers in an internationally referred journal. So what we are telling you at that material time is that yes, you have got a PhD thesis committee that must guide your operations, but you also have your academic, right? We call them those fellows who actually guard, right? And they are gatekeepers because they guard the quality of the knowledge that is produced in that particular section or area where you are undertaking your PhD. So as you can see, you will learn to organize large chunks of information. You will learn to do original research. You will learn to organize your time so that you are as productive as you want to be. And you can see here, most PhD thesis writers find this experience amazing in retrospect. Now, writing a PhD thesis is a true learning experience writ large. A contrast between the coursework papers you've written and the PhD thesis is useful here. And clearly, you have been successful in your paper writing, and therefore there is no reason why you should not be successful in this case. And besides, you've passed so many levels, and you've scored highly. So at this level, this PhD training that you are undergoing will help you bring together the pieces and chunks of information that you have been exposed to throughout your training, ladies and gentlemen. So the successes you have accumulated over the span of your academic career on smaller projects provide the confidence that you can meet this new challenge of writing your PhD thesis and going through the ropes of a PhD. And of course, that confidence is very important. And you know that a PhD thesis is a lengthy document which is written by a graduate student in the process of completing a doctoral degree. You also know that writing a PhD thesis includes reporting on research, includes working with a committee and the chair. I'm talking about the doctoral committee and the chair of that committee, and having orals. We call this viva voce at the end of the day. So chances are that one of your strengths as a student has been your ability to write acceptable, even highly praised coursework papers. So you appropriately expect to draw on that experience in your PhD thesis writing. And of course, in this case, you might assume that the coursework preceding your PhD thesis prepares you for writing your PhD thesis. So give attention to the courseworks if you are still doing some courseworks, because and do not be tempted to go to the various textbooks and just Xerox chunks of materials from there, because that is plagiarism. So what you have to do is to pick ideas from those particular journal articles and the books that you are reading, and make sure that you advance your arguments appropriately. So you might also assume, ladies and gentlemen, that coursework preceding your PhD is not very important, but at this mature time I'm telling you it is very important, because it prepares you, particularly thinking of all the paper writing required in your courses, because you've done a lot of this, and clearly those experiences will be useful, ladies and gentlemen. But it's important to understand that writing a PhD thesis is both different from and also similar to coursework paper. So I know you've done that, and you're going to borrow experiences from your courseworks, but do not trust that knowledge 100%, and do not think that that's the only thing that there is. So you need to really think through very, very hard, and you must work very hard. So those experiences will be useful. It's important to understand that writing a PhD thesis is both different and similar to a coursework paper, ladies and gentlemen. So we now certainly look at this small aspect of writing a PhD thesis. If you pick any PhD proposal or PhD thesis from your library, and I want to encourage you to go and pick these books from the library, and look at the title page, ladies and gentlemen. So if you look at the title page, you will have access to useful information. I call this additional information about PhD thesis. The title page gives useful insights into the total document if we examine it very closely. And let me just give you an example of some of the information that you find on the PhD thesis front page, or what you call the title page, right? And you need to write down these things, because this information is very important, right? So one of the things that you'll find on the title page is the spacing of information on the page, right? Now that spacing of information on the page suggests the PhD thesis is a formal document with a prescribed format, distinct from most of other writings that we have seen, including your coursework papers and the ones you have produced for discussions. The second thing you'll note from that cover page is the use of technical terms in the title. For example, you may have a topic, right, but somewhere you'll have a colon. Somebody says the case of manufacturing firms, the case of the service sector, right? Now that writing suggests the text is expressed, and that text that is expressed there is addressed to a small subset of our society which is familiar with the technical language. And the title of the PhD thesis is highly focused. From the title, we can identify unique characteristics, right? For instance, there are certain aspects which tell us that there is analysis of data. There is analysis of data. For example, if the topic is a qualitative analysis of customers' perception of service recovery in commercial banks, right? So a special type of analysis will be reported in this case, and that is a qualitative analysis that is being reported. The source for the data, right, which informs the study, is also identified, right? So in this case, the perceptions of customers are the ones that are going to be studied. The research reports on a highly focused issue, right? And in this case, only the issue of customer perceptions of service recovery will be investigated, excluding, for example, any documentations of the service quality, right? From the same example of the topic I've given you, the data are collected in a restricted setting. The site for the service recovery is restricted to places identified. In our case, it is actually the commercial banks, ladies and gentlemen. The other aspect that you'll find on most of the title page of PhD thesis is the academic history of the degree of the candidate, right? This information can be seen, and this information will be seen from the paper, ladies and gentlemen. So that's why you'll find things like the academic history of the candidate, but the PhD thesis, right, in this case, is a product of collaboration among a number of people. And if you look at the cover page, you will see the doctoral committee, right? The doctoral committee will be indicated, and along with the PhD student. Now, each member of the doctoral committee holds a doctoral degree. That information is presented, and one of these individuals on the committee is certainly identified as the chair, and that's the chair of the doctoral committee. The PhD thesis is not only requirements. It's not the only requirement for the doctoral degree. There are additional requirements. For example, you're going to use a computer or a word processor in the writing, or at least in the presentation of the PhD thesis. And all the information must be presented neatly. And again, just by studying the cover page, one slice of data, we will be able to identify important elements of the PhD thesis, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, this is not the only source of that information that you need. There are so many other sources. I've already told you. Pick any document from the university, right, and supplement it with this kind of thing. So you need to look for one of the PhD, completed PhD thesis, so that you get to understand how things are supposed to be done. We need also to compare information presented in one PhD and other PhD thesis done elsewhere. I know at your university, if you are studying at Makerere University, yes, documents do exist, but if you also go to Uganda Matters University, you also see another format. If you go to University of Cape Town, you find another one. If you go to Cairo University, International University, or the American University in Cairo, you also find a different format. So I want to encourage you to pick as many PhD dissertations completed at different universities as possible, and look at their title pages. And most of them will have lengthy descriptive titles, names of the doctoral committee members, a statement about the partial fulfillment of requirements for a degree, formal professional presentation style, etc., etc. So all these are very important, of course, with some level of variations from one university to another university. So when we combine our insights from dissertation samples from different universities, we know that these are title pages from PhD thesis, not PhD thesis proposals or even term papers. So PhD thesis may use different research methodologies. PhDs may use different styles of the presentation, of course suggesting a required format rather than a unique one created by each individual, and that's what we do for what you call term papers or coursework papers, whatever it is, and the format in a coursework is determined by your professor. But if you are doing a PhD, everything is determined by the doctoral committee, and of course the international scholarly audience where you are contributing knowledge, ladies and gentlemen. So there are also several contrasts, some of which might indicate subtitle differences in the relationship between the student and the committee. And these nuances may have little import for you, or they may suggest a specific stance which you should consider adopting in your conversation with your doctoral committee. For example, the role of the committee is not, for instance, articulated. You will pick the document, fine, but the role is not articulated, so you may have to go to the office concerned with the PhD so that they tell you what the doctoral committee is supposed to do, what the chair is responsible for, the kind of roles and responsibilities. And again, in some sample PhD thesis, the doctoral committee members are listed below the student's name, implying that they supported the student's work, whereas in other samples from other universities, the positioning of the doctoral committee on top of the page may suggest that the committee directed the PhD thesis. So it's very important that you pick these things, ladies and gentlemen. So the prominence of the student's name may also differ from one university to another, especially in terms of how these things appear on the PhD thesis title page. In one sample, the doctoral student's name is all in uppercase letters, equivalent to the emphasis given on the title of the PhD thesis. In another sample, the name appears in upper and lowercase letters, similar to the listing for the committee. In one institution, the doctoral degrees, for example, PhD held by the committee members are noted, whereas the other institutions seem to emphasize the fact that the committee is comprised of professors. In some PhD thesis samples, as you will discover very soon, there is a notation of the degrees previously awarded to the doctoral candidate. These sample title pages certainly, as I've already said, ladies and gentlemen, offer us an initial sense of the many issues involved in writing a PhD thesis or proposal. So let's just try to contrast a little bit your coursework paper versus the PhD thesis that you're going to write, ladies and gentlemen. I've been reliably informed that you are currently being grounded in a number of business-related areas where you intend to certainly graduate with a PhD. Some of you are doing energy economics, others are doing auditing and investigations, and others are doing financial economics, others are probably doing marketing, others are doing entrepreneurship, others are doing accounting and finance, others are doing training, human growth and development, others are doing procurement and supply chain management, others are studying entrepreneurship, others are studying, for instance, ICT, whatever the case, right? So you have been given, I've been told that you were given books which you are supposed to review. Please make sure that you read these books. I know that some students, when they get on the PhD program, they think it is the responsibility of the professor to read the books and then come to class and start explaining these issues to the students. And then the role of a student is to simply write it down and cram those notes and reproduce. Far from it. This is not what is done at the PhD. At the PhD, you pick a book and read it from cover to cover. Right, you crack that book. If you don't understand it the first time, you read it the second time, understand it, pick arguments from the book. So I want to encourage you, if you are given these workshop books or the books you are going to use for your PhD workshops, please, again, depending on the area of specialty where you want to go, please pick these books, read these books with a critical mind, identify emerging research themes or probably ideas or arguments or theses from these books. Go to the internet, identify and download relevant scholarly journal publications, starting with the scientific ones. And you can easily get those scientific, because in every discipline, you've got those fellows who have championed knowledge in those particular areas. Please start with those ones and then later on read the general ones, right? And at the end of the day, when you pick those ideas, use the ideas to write a coursework paper, which you present to a panel of experts in a workshop setting, and then they will critique your papers. I know that some of us are not used to critiquing. When people critique and dismiss your arguments, you start saying that these fellows do not like me at all. So you think that a PhD is about liking. And I just want to inform you that you have to forget all about that, and you need to learn to grow at this material time. So in writing your coursework papers, certainly you'll follow what your professor has directed you to do in the main, and your professors will monitor your pace, and many, if not all, of the sources which you are going to use or you refer to in your paper will be suggested or were already suggested by your professor, and the topic of your paper will also probably be predetermined by your professor, so you'll have a discussion with him and you have a deadline to meet. Now, your coursework paper usually comprise one element in a total evaluation of your work in the entire PhD course, and eventually resulting in the grade which your professor will enter and deposit with the dean, and of course, I mean here the faculty dean and the registrar, which indicates that you have successfully completed the course. Now, whether you receive a grade A or a grade B in your coursework, that may not be the most important outcome, right? Now, in a term paper or courseworks, when you get a grade, A or B or C, whatever it is, that will be the most important, and you will have reached that kind of terminal stage of that particular paper. For a PhD thesis, that's not what it is. For most, right, as you can see, when they complete their coursework papers and they get a very nice grade, right, they have a sigh of relief. And the completion of that requirement yields great relief and satisfaction. And a few students concern themselves with making sense of the course in the context of other studies. So at this time, we have sufficient information, ladies and gentlemen, to document our growing understanding of some of the differences and similarities between coursework papers and the PhD thesis. Now, in addition to the insights we have developed from the analysis that we have just gone through, there are several other related issues which become noteworthy in our comparison, ladies and gentlemen. And I'm going to give you these issues. We shall begin with number one. When writing a PhD thesis, you're expected to break some new ground. So you should know, as you move into your PhD, as you certainly try to get, as you know, this transition is very important, and you meet it as you transit from courseworks into the PhD thesis. Remember, you writing this PhD thesis is a demonstration that you are going to break some new ground. You're expected to contribute to the evolving knowledge base of a discipline through your PhD thesis. In a coursework paper, you may explore some areas in depth. There is literal need to determine if others have taken this route, whether they have gone through this route before. In fact, everyone in your class may be writing on the same topic. In writing your PhD thesis, you conduct an intensive data search ensuring that the project you are mounting is different from what has already been done. You'll bring a new perspective into the area. You will study with the new lenses, becoming aware of different phenomenon. Your study will contribute to the expanding literature in your field. And therefore, it is very, very important for you to indicate what we call the theoretical gap in your work, ladies and gentlemen. The second aspect, which is also important and unique to a PhD thesis, is that when you write a coursework paper, you are aware of the professor's biases, and you probably deal with these in the writing of your project. When you are writing your PhD thesis, you have many readers of your work, right? Remember, when you are doing courseworks, yes, you are only writing to your professor. If he invites another person or other people, then that is very good. But rarely do professors invite so many people in class during the facilitation of a particular course. But if you're writing a PhD thesis, you have many readers of your work, and I want to emphasize this point. And potentially these are readers with the different and conflicting theoretical orientations, and that's why you must be thorough, right? It will be essential for you to deal with this potential conflict, discussing competing theories and ideas, and ultimately your interpretation of data will need to reflect an understanding of multiple viewpoints. So the other aspects which the third one, that in contrast to your term papers, which probably drew on sources recommended by your professor, your PhD thesis will reflect your resourcefulness at identifying particular sources. In fact, in the process of writing your PhD thesis, you become the expert. In contrast to your term papers, where your professor typically was more knowledgeable than you on the topic and the aspects. So at this material time, you become an expert, and those are things that should be prepared to pick from this PhD program and the workshops that we are undertaking. Now, again, number 4, remember that a coursework paper is returned to the student with no record of that paper remaining at the institution. So at the university, you may not find any paper. That particular paper that you did will not be deposited at the university. But certainly, if you are doing a PhD, your PhD thesis will be available to the entire academic community through PhD thesis abstracts, international, and through interlibrary loan, for example, ladies and gentlemen. So number 5, again, which is very important for us to note, is that it is very important to acknowledge that your relationship with the doctoral committee members, right, will influence the progress that you make. But if you are a kind of person that is not bothered and you only work with one member of the doctoral committee for, let's say, around 6 months or 1 year without seeing the other members, and remember your doctoral committee will have around 5 people or 6 people, and if you later on you are reminded by the dean of the faculty that you must go, or maybe a PhD coordinator that you must go and meet the other members of the doctoral committee, and then you start looking out for them. If one took around 6 months, if the other remaining 5 doctoral committee members, each one of them takes about 5 months in a sequence, then of course you'll be talking about 6 times 5, and those are 30 months. And 30 months, you'll be talking about how many years? You'll be talking about close to 3 years or 2.5 years. And that is time lost and time wasted. And you can imagine, because you'll be given the doctoral committee members even before you go to the field. So at the stage of undertaking your proposal, that's when you are given the doctoral committee members. So if it takes you 2.5 years at the proposal stage, and it takes you another 3 years, probably, or another 2.5 years or 3 years at the PhD level, that is PhD thesis, final thesis level, you see that you already have 5 years before you submit your thesis for examination and before you defend. So you may end up taking 7 years on the PhD program or 10 years on the PhD program. And the tendency for students is actually to complain and at the end of the day blame the doctoral committee members and the supervisors for failing to work, even when they themselves have failed to do the right thing at that material time. The 6th point that you need to note, ladies and gentlemen, is that when writing coursework papers, you wrote that paper independently. Writing your PhD thesis requires collaboration with your doctoral committee members. A term paper, again, is one short deal, usually, and you turn in the paper, it is read and evaluated, and sometimes returned with a grade or comments. With a PhD thesis, typically there are numerous drafts, and you must be ready for those drafts. No longer is it acceptable to get a passing grade or hopeful comments at this level. Now you need to respond to those comments, right? Whatever comment every doctoral committee member gives you, you must respond to it, and you must report back and give a report on what you've done to each, or what you've done with each of the comments given to you by the doctoral committee members or by the doctoral committee in general. Now, these remarks and questions become directions for improving your text, as well as guidelines for future drafts and future parts of your PhD thesis. Your PhD thesis is a work in progress, so if you are given a comment and you simply keep the document, you'll have a problem. But I will advise that whenever you submit and you are given a comment, start right away addressing those particular comments. And if there is any comment that you don't understand, the doctoral committee chair is available, or the doctoral committee members are also available. You can consult them. Your committee's input seeks to promote the possibility of attaining some level of perfection. So these are very important. And the 8th aspect for you to note, ladies and gentlemen, is that in contrast to a term paper or a coursework paper, which usually must be completed within the time frame of a 1 semester or probably period allotted to a module, your PhD thesis has no such time limits. One of the distinguishing characteristics of a PhD is that it goes through multiple drafts before it finally receives the approval of the committee. In fact, frequently there is a PhD thesis proposal which needs to be approved prior to the initiation of the PhD thesis research project, ladies and gentlemen. So the proposal then serves as a start for the PhD thesis, which is revised to document the actual study. And ladies and gentlemen, the 9th point for you to note is that a PhD thesis is frequently developed chapter by chapter, or chapter part by chapter part, with the student gradually working towards completing the total document while receiving comments along the way. But coursework papers are usually submitted for evaluation in their entirety. So I'm trying to use these 2 coursework papers and a thesis. For you who are required to do both, certainly you know what I mean, because you are going to write both. And for some of you who are simply doing your PhD by thesis only, then the term paper does not apply. But you may actually draw from your past experience where you had to write term papers, where you had to write coursework papers and presentations, the workshops from your master's level. So that's what it is, ladies and gentlemen. And lastly, or 10, while writing a term paper, it is a fairly private experience with the professors typically being the sole reader of your paper, your PhD thesis becomes a public document. Others may engage you in a conversation about your study. Those on your committee will talk to you about your work. Your PhD program peers will talk with you about your progress and your findings. And even on the last day, when you have the orals, right, what we call the public defense, I can assure you the public will also engage you in your PhD work. And you will, from time to time, be required to identify workshops and conferences and journals where you're going to present your work, ladies and gentlemen. So, and maybe also professional organizations may invite you from time to time to go and talk to them. So those are major aspects. Maybe let me add you about one or two more points. I know I had said finally number 10, but I think you need to consider these other points because they are equally important. Friends and associates outside of your program will ask about your progress in completing your PhD thesis. When friends hear that you're working on a PhD thesis, they may engage you in extended conversations about your topic, and unusual occurrence when you're writing a term paper, nobody may actually ask you what you're working on. So ladies and gentlemen, I think let me not really spend too much time in this lecture. I'm going to give you I will be taking you through the second part of the same lecture. But right now, I'm giving you a table that presents all the arguments that we have been discussing, and I'm sure you can see the table on the screen here. That is our table 1 for our workshop. Please go through these aspects one by one. As you can see, in many respects, your successes in writing coursework papers were brief forays, preparation for the extended journal of writing your PhD thesis, and of course, to provide you with additional confidence. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to strongly urge you to go to your university library and find the section where the PhD theses are located. Choose one written by someone you know, by a potential PhD thesis chair, and at random, please pick that particular document and try to read it and try to understand that document. And while at this time you are a tourist, I must say, because you are not yet grounded and you haven't probably understood very well what it means to undertake a PhD, ultimately it will become your native land. You will value the library, you will like the library, and the best way to change from being a tourist to becoming a native is to put down roots and stay for a while, becoming familiar and comfortable with the customs of the trade, ladies and gentlemen. But your first 30 minutes trip will whet your desire to learn more, and you return many times to this section of the library for advice, for confirmation, and of course the number of other things that you will be required to do, ladies and gentlemen. So again, this diagram is very important for you, and I hope you've had an opportunity to look at the ideas which are summarized in the diagram there. And I can only say, ladies and gentlemen, it was really a pleasure for me to stand before you and facilitate the PhD seminar series in business management. Our first topic has been on getting a sense of the PhD terrain, and in my next workshop, I'll continue with the same. Ladies and gentlemen, I wish you a nice time. Stay well and stay safe. Bye.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to again remind all of us that this video and many more are available online. just go to YouTube and look for Professor Joseph Ntai, navigating the PhD terrain, and also many other videos, especially for those who are doing energy economics. There is a lot that he has done on philosophy of science in energy economics. So I invite you, go to YouTube and you'll be able to get that information for yourself. So today we decided to just take a break and go back to the basics, and I hope you have picked some few things that might be useful and can help you in your PhD journey. I know it's a tough one. There is back and forth. When you think you have moved, and before you know it, you're told that you need to go back and do A, B, C, D. So that is the journey. Never get discouraged. Continue and until you reach the ultimate goal. This morning, I would like to once again thank all of you for being part of the Students' Congress, and we've come to the end. I would like now to invite Professor Michael Okoche, I hope is available to take us through the next session. Professor, over to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Joseph, for taking us through the first session. And I think the session looked live, like Professor was, to me, this side, like he was really taking us through direct, though it is on YouTube. I think also, just like you said, there are so many of those lectures on YouTube, which I think all of us can benefit from them. So this morning, let me begin by acknowledging and appreciating you for having logged in for this session. I believe that we have already learned a lot from the first session, and then now we are going to the next session. Before we begin with this session, allow me to acknowledge that last week was a very interesting week. We had a very nice presentation from one of the presenters, and I think it was very outstanding. And then also midweek, we had a defense at moves. I think also I saw most of us were logged in. And I think sessions like this really help us to grow academically and intellectually. So this morning, I want to begin by acknowledging most of the student leaders who have always supported in the beginning the early morning session. I want to thank you, Joseph. Thank you so much, Joseph. I also want to acknowledge, of course, our mentor, Professor Joseph Ntai. Professor, thank you so much for having started this platform and also keeping on supporting and guiding us through bringing different facilitators and also coming up together with the program. I also want to acknowledge Professor Laura Orobia. Professor, you're welcome. I also want to acknowledge Professor James Kagari. Yeah, welcome. Dr. Gideon Nkuzinza, you are welcome, and we appreciate you so much for the continued support. This morning, actually, it was supposed to be our brother to take us through the session, but I think he had a long journey somewhere, so I'd gone up country. So I'm standing in for our brother, and then we try to move forward. But we're having a presentation, a PhD proposal presentation by Charles. Is it Charles? Charles, you're on?
Yes, Prof, I'm on.
Yeah, so you'll be taking us through a PhD proposal presentation. So what I request all of us is that let us pay attention and we'll be able to support him by making constructive comments in the process. So Charles, let me take this opportunity to welcome you. And I know as more of the senior colleagues come in, we shall be acknowledging them. So Charles, I want to request you to share with us and then present. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, Prof. Good morning to everybody who has been able to join. My name is Charles Olukoto, and I'm going to make a presentation titled Scalability of Digital Innovations in Developing Countries. And I'm going to try to go through some of the items that I have presented as part of my outline for the presentation. Scaling of digital innovations has become really a key requirement for addressing many of the challenges in society today, given that we are in the digital world. And over the last 20 years, has also witnessed a steady increase in the development of digital innovations that cut across various sectors, including sectors such as agriculture, health, education, among others. There's also there's a general understanding that once digital innovations are developed and piloted, then they will also, it's also expected that these digital innovations will eventually scale on a large scale to benefit more users or people. However, recent studies show that there are some digital innovations, those successful at pilot, some of them really struggle to scale beyond the pilot phase. You find that there are fewer digital innovations that have been able to scale beyond the pilot phase so as to benefit more users on in a larger geographical area. And many of these such digital innovations have largely remained at that startup stage, at the pilot stage. In fact, globally, from the literature, we find that there are over 78% of innovations that have struggled or failed actually to scale, despite of being successful at the pilot as part of the development process. If you look at Uganda, there was a study that was supported by UCC on some of the digital innovations in agriculture. From that study, we see that over 60% of those digital innovations are really at a pilot. So there are very few that are at the process of trying to scale beyond the pilot phase development. The failure to scale of digital innovation means that the people that were supposed to benefit from those innovations will miss out in terms of accessing some of the essential information and knowledge, especially if you look at the farmers, they will miss out opportunity even to connect with the value chain actors. And this situation ends up perpetuating low productivity, profitability, and even sometimes which translates to poor standard of living among some of the users, like smallholder farmers. And this situation calls for solutions to really accelerate, to increase the scalability of these digital innovations. The current studies on scalability have not fully explained why these digital innovations are not scaling as expected. And that's the reason why we are conducting this study. The concept of scalability stems from some of the work by Everest Rogers, Diffusion of Innovation. He looked at it as a process by which innovation spreads in the society. In fact, the very initial studies were used to explain how agricultural innovations spread, how they were successfully spreading in the early years, I think majorly in the US. And also note from the literature that some of the studies looked at it in terms of technology adoption frameworks and models. They've tried to use those to try to explain digital innovation scalability. Our current study is going to be anchored on these two, diffusion of innovation theory by Rogers and technology, organization, and environment framework by Tonaski and Fisher, 1990. Diffusion of innovation theory, we intend to use it to explain aspects of innovation, communication channels, time, and social system aspects of the study. The researchers also will use this to explain aspects of the social system, such aspects of the social system, as illustrated by Rogers, and their role, and using it to explain their role in the scaling process. The DOE framework, on the other hand, will help the researcher to understand how contextual factors, technological, organizational, environmental, influence scalability of digital innovations. The specific contextual factors will be adopted as the independent variables, while scalability of digital innovations will constitute a dependent variable. But it's worth noting that these theories initially they have been used to explain other aspects, not directly explain as part of explaining scalability, but they've been used, like I said, in other aspects like adoption studies. But we tend to use this, we think they are relevant, and we want to use them as part of our study to explain our study. These are some of an idea of what those theory, diffusion of innovation theory aspects that we tend to borrow, especially when you're looking at some of the characteristics of the decision-making unit as part of the diffusion of innovation theory. I have to borrow some of those, and then also the variables as actuated by Tunaski and pressure. Scalability has been defined differently by different scholars, on top of what I already said about what Rogers has said. And it has been defined as, in terms of expanding or adapting to reach a greater number of people, according to World Bank. Others have talked about it in terms of providing more quality to benefit more people over a wider geographical area, more quickly and more equitably, more and lastingly. Others studies have looked at it as the ease or difficulty of expanding and institutionalizing innovation. In this particular study, we adopt the definition as a deliberate effort to increase the impact of innovation successfully tested at pilot or experimental projects so as to benefit more people in a wider geographical area. So in this study, we want to adopt, we would be able to adopt that definition, because we think it aligns well with some of the aspects that we intend to study under this research. From the literature also, we noted that there are different dimensions of scalability, and they range. There are many of different dimensions, but of course, from all those different dimensions, including scaling up, vertical scaling, scale bend, and so on, each of them mean different things. For an example, when we talk about scaling up, it means impacting laws and policy, or changing institutions or level policy, something like that. If you talk about vertical scalability, it talks about moving from one local or provincial engagement to nation, from one region to another. That's what we call vertical scalability. When you talk about horizontal scalability, we talk about, it means replication and dissemination, or increasing the number of people or communities being impacted. Scaling out means replication of services from one geographical area to another. There are other aspects like scaling deep, which involves aspects of culture, innovation causing change in being part of the cultural roots. But for purposes of this study, we intended to look at scalability in the dimensions of scaling out or horizontal scaling, which means replication or dissemination or increasing the number of people or communities impacted, and the replication of services from one geographical area to another. So we are adopting that definition or that dimension. We also note from the literature that there are some of the indicators of scalability include people, time, geographical, and context, which we are specifically very much interested. So we, among the others, we think that for purpose of this study, we will look at it in indicators in terms of the people, time, geographical location, and the context. And we will not look at other aspects of indicators. So we also, since we are talking about digital innovations is conceptualized in literature as the use of digital technology and applications to improve existing businesses or processes and workforce efficiency, to enhance customer experience and possibly launch a new product. So, so that is what when you talk about digital innovation, those are some of the things we were looking at in terms of digital technology and its application to improve the business processes. For the case of now agriculture, smallholder agriculture, so there are some of the maybe processes within the smallholder farmer. That's where technology has been applied. So that's what we'll be looking at. What are some of the current gaps from our initial study? We discovered that there are limited studies on scalability of digital innovations in developing countries, especially in some of the critical sectors like agriculture, which is key in some of the developing countries. Also, we know that current studies do not adequately explain how potential factors influence scalability of digital innovations. And we also know that current studies also focus more on contextual aspects of that relates to individual users. Like as much as some of these studies that deal with spread, especially those in the adoption, and so the emphasis has been more on the user, end user, or if it is dealing with organizations, the emphasis has been on an organization as a user, and we feel that fewer studies have looked at try to explain it in terms of an organization as a provider of the technology, and in this case we want to denote that by calling it a vendor, a technology vendor organization. So fewer studies have looked at it, try to explain the spread by looking at potential factors that relate to the provider. The previous ones have focused more on the users, an organization as a user. So want to look at it, that's what we note from the literature. The current study attempts to understand how technology vendor organization contextual factors can explain scalability of digital innovations in agriculture in developing countries. Yeah, so what is our problem? Like I said initially in the introduction, scalability of digital innovation is a key requirement and is becoming very critical. And digital innovations offer the greatest opportunity for enhancing performance in different sectors. But in this case, if we look at looking at smallholder farmers, it has the greatest opportunity for enhancing farmer access to information and all the other services from the value actors within the value chain, agricultural value chain, including access to inputs and even access to the market. COVID-19 global pandemic has highlighted this, especially at the time when it constrained in-person information access, including like providing support services to the farmers. Several digital innovations in the agriculture sector have been developed with the hope, as because of this importance of digital innovations in all sectors, and including agriculture, several digital innovations have been developed with the hope that they should be able to scale them to benefit more farmers. But unfortunately, majority of these innovations have struggled to scale up beyond the pilot phase, as already said. and this in Uganda, and even globally, it's still a challenge. Over 78% at a global scale fail to scale. In Uganda, over 60% of digital innovation that remain at pilot. That is according to the survey study done supported by UCC, in which over 183 digital innovations were surveyed. And that was part of the finding. The failure to scale digital innovation means that most smallholder farmers are unable to access essential knowledge, information, and services, including access to the market. This could explain maybe low productivity, profitability, and livelihood of smallholder farmers in developing countries, especially in times like this, in times of pandemic, where it was in-person services was a bit of a challenge. This study seeks to develop a framework to assess vendor readiness to scale digital innovation for smallholder farmers in a country like Uganda. The purpose of this study is to develop that framework for assessing vendor readiness to scale digital innovations among smallholder farmers in the country. Our research question that we want to try to answer is what contextual factors influence scalability of digital innovations for smallholder farmers in a developing country? Our specific objectives would want to determine the how technological contextual factors influence scalability of digital innovations. We also want to examine the relationship between the organizational contextual factors and the intentions to scale. We also want to look at to determine the mediating role of organizational intention to scale on the relationship between organizational contextual factors and the scalability of digital innovation for smallholder farmers in developing country. Fourthly, we want to determine the relation between environmental contextual factors and scalability of digital innovation for smallholder farmers. Our hypothesis, we want to look at we look at it as terms of technological contextual factors have a positive relationship with scalability of digital innovation for smallholder farmers in the developing country. Number two, there is a positive relationship between organizational contextual factors and organizational intention to scale. Three, organizations' intention to scale has a mediating role on the relationship between organizational contextual factors and scalability of digital innovation for smallholder farmers in developing countries. Four, environmental contextual factors have a positive relationship with scalability of digital innovation for smallholder farmers in developing countries. We expect, in terms of significance, we expect that this study will contribute to e-agriculture studies, the field of information system, by identifying antecedents that explain scalability of digital innovations among smallholder farmers in developing countries. We believe that the study will lead to the development of a framework for assessing vendor readiness to scale digital innovations among smallholder farmers in developing countries. This is a theoretical framework as adopted from Donaski and Fisher and Rogers, 2003. And the key variables proposed through those frameworks included technology contextual factors, organizational contextual factors, and then environment or external task environment contextual factors. So we intend to test these variables to determine their applicability in explaining scalability of digital innovations, in developing countries. Because we are dealing with a vendor organization, not just as a user organization, we introduced a mediating variable where we looked at this intention to scale, because we think aspects of decision making on scaling could have effects on the organization's ability to scale. So that one we introduced it, and we would want to see whether it has any influence on the vendor organization decision to scale. In terms of the scope, subject scope, we restrict ourselves really to scalability, and within the context of digital innovations for smallholder farmers. So digital innovations and scalability. In terms of scope, in terms of this sample that we're looking at, we're going to look at about 123 digital innovations in Uganda, and our study is going to be defined within Uganda. Now, I'd like to move to methodology, discuss about methodology. Our research philosophical foundation, looking at ontology, where we're trying to explain, to understand the form and nature of the study. And we view scalability as a structured reality. And when we talk about the epistemology, where we're looking at what the basic belief about knowledge and what can be known, we look at it as positivist research approach that we intend to adopt. And the goal is really to test and validate the hypotheses that are generated from the toy theory and the toy theory. So that's what we look at. In terms of the research approach, the deductive research strategy will be adopted. And this means that we are moving. We'll look at. We've identified the theory where we are going to, from it, where we're going to generate hypotheses we already discussed. And from those hypotheses, we'll be able to make some observations, and from which we can be able to confirm confirm the theory. So we will be, our study will adopt a deductive research strategy. We also believe that the area that we are studying is digital innovation is already well structured. It's a well structured problem, and that gives the reason why we've opted to look at deductive research strategy. And of course, where we are seeking to test the application of the DOI and TOE, a diffusion of innovation and the technology, organization, and environmental theories on data. We tend to test this. The study seeks to either confirm or criticize the existing framework that is relevant to the scalability in line with the deductive approach to study. The research strategy, we propose to adopt a survey research strategy to guide the study on and in explaining why and how we intend to conduct the study. And as part of this, we will develop structured interviews and semi-structured interviews will be used to collect data directly from the respondents using face-to-face approach. The choice of for the research method, we will use only one method, one type, and that is quantitative, not qualitative. Sorry about that typo. Quantitative research method will be used for the study. A quantitative descriptive field study will be used to answer research questions, to derive requirements for developing the proposed framework. This is because it provides numerical data that can prove or disapprove theory in line with the deductive research strategy. It also generates factual and reliable outcome data that is generalizable to a larger population. In terms of the research, we shall adopt the cross-sectional research approach for the study. Data will be collected from different respondents within a specified period of time. What are some of the techniques and procedures for data collection and analysis? We intend to under scale development, the researcher intends to develop a closed questions for answering alternatives and that will be able to administer. So a question will develop an instrument, will develop a tool with the questions and alternative responses that will be presented to the respondents. We, as part of the sampling strategy, we're going to look at stratified random sampling, where we are going to select 123 out of the 183 when organizations to participate in the survey, as profiled by UCC study. Because these digital innovations are in different sectors, even within the agriculture, we will develop a strata. Strata will be created based on these agricultural sectors, so that we have equal representation of the different digital technologies in agriculture. Stratified random sampling was selected because digital innovations operating in varied sectors, as already mentioned. And when that, we believe that stratified random sampling will provide equal opportunity of representation of the various sectors and digital innovations in this study area. A total of 183 vendor organizations in Uganda profiled by the UCC will be considered for the study. Using the Morgan table, we we determined 123 vendor organizations to participate in the survey. As I mentioned, the questionnaire and the schedule will be administered to selected sample. The primary data will be collected from vendors of digital innovations for smallholder farmers in Uganda. Respondents will be selected from the top, middle, and operational level categories. Stratified random sampling will be used to select the sample, while simple random sampling will be used to identify the respondents for face-to-face interviews. We will conduct the pre-testing and piloting of the study tools. This will involve piloting the questions, revisiting the questions, and finalizing the questionnaire. The sample data from question will be determined, and the questions and schedule administered. And this will be collected as primary data from the digital vendors. The unit of analysis will be the vendor organization, and the unit of inquiry we will look at it as owner managers or innovators. Owner managers and innovators are we think that this category of people, especially owner managers and innovators, are more knowledgeable and participate in vendor organization decision making. And then we'll be able to, after the test, then we'll be able to also participate in the final data collection following the pre-testing and piloting of the study as suggested. In terms of data quality, we also intend to ensure data quality control, and where we are going to emphasize issue of reliability and validity of the data. In this study, reliability will be gauged best, will ensure reliability, and will also ensure that they align to internal consistency of the variables. And validity, on the other hand, will determine the extent to which the scores present in the variable they are intended to. The study will adopt different types of reliability, including content validity and construct validity. And this will be gauged by looking at discriminant validity or covariant validity. Under data analysis, the response will be collected using data questionnaire. As stated, the researcher will then transform this into readable format by capturing them to the relevant data analysis tools, from which the analysis will be done and the interpretation of the findings. Then finally, we'll be able to consider the implications of the findings of the research study. We will develop descriptive statistics and correlations we'll extract them from the study for further interpretation. Ethical considerations, we will seek for permission from the relevant bodies, including IRBs. We will also develop consent forms that will be presented to the respondents to seek for their consent before the study is conducted. Some of the anticipated limitations, because we intend to do face-to-face structured and semi-structured administration of the survey. Some of the respondents may not be available face-to-face. Some of the target vendors may, depending on the time, some of them might have maybe changed the kind of digital, the type of digital innovation they provide, or some of them would have become inactive, because now we are basing on the list that was generated in 2019. So some of them might no longer be active. Limited resources to facilitate the travel because it involves a lot of moving. And we still think that things like pandemics, including Ebola and COVID, could restrict the movement since we're talking about face-to-face. We intend to manage this by possibly engaging the respondents and rescheduling where necessary. We will also seek for alternative respondents, but within the vendor organizations. If one is not, then we could be able to seek for alternatives, respondents within, knowledgeable alternative respondents. And then the other is we will also consider making use of telephone where it becomes difficult to conduct face-to-face, telephone and even online sessions face-to-face as a way of mitigating some of the limitations, anticipated limitations. Thank you for listening, and I welcome your comments.
Okay, thank you, Charles, so much for the presentation. I think we have sufficient time to give comments and also ask questions. Before we go into the session of questions, allow me again acknowledge the critical, appreciate all the people who have logged in this morning. And of course, we have students from all the universities in Uganda, students from universities in East Africa, the SADC region, West Africa, and other parts of the world. We are one of the students who has consistently logged in from Nepal, that's Radha Gimire. Also want to acknowledge the student leaders, Bosco Merit, Joseph Elasu, Charles Rupert, Slivia Rakit, and then Wabkara Bernard. Allow me also to acknowledge the senior colleagues in the platform. Of course, our mentors, Professor Joseph Ntai, Professor Lauro Robia, Professor Pincho, Professor James Kagari, Dr. Gideon Kuzinza, Dr. Evelyn Akesh, Dr. Goret Chiune, Dr. Paul Dabu, and Dr. Isaac Newton Kayungu. I think this morning, all of us have listened to the presentation, and I would want to invite comments. Maybe we could begin with the students, and then we move to the senior colleagues. Do we have any student with a comment before I go to the senior colleagues? I think George has put this, there's one on the chat there. So Charles, you should be noting that. Okay, let me just invite everybody. And I saw one of the senior colleagues, that's Dr. Gideon, had raised up his hand. Dr. Gideon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Charles, for the presentation. I like your topic. It is very relevant and quite demanding. from global and local context. However, I would like to give you some comments. They may not be so significant because I'm going to base on your presentation, not your document. I presume that they may be, what I'm going to ask maybe is in the main document. As I was listening from the background section, I was eager to pay attention to the context. I saw your emphasis is on agriculture. So I kept on imagining that this issue is almost in all sectors. Most sectors appreciating the digital innovations. And so I questioned, why don't you give us some facts about the innovations, different sectors, and then we see why you have managed to concentrate on scalability of digital innovations in agriculture. Why agriculture? So the justification for that, for me, I did not see it coming out well. In other words, where are you coming from? Why concentrate in area of agriculture, yet other sectors are also doing the same? That is what I found to be missing. If you would have a table or a graph that shows that kind of information, to me it would really be a catching area why you looked at agriculture. The other one, I also kept on listening to you, and I wanted to know what is your central argument? What I seem to see is that using the theoretical perspective, you are bringing in the predictive issue of this problem. And I also saw your emphasis on the methodology being an issue because you are saying a few studies explain how scalability is done. Perhaps you are questioning the method of exploring that problem. I also endeavored to see that you are talking about a conceptual issue that is really seen from previous studies. So the question is, what is your central argument that guides you to come up with the purpose of the study? I think you may need to organize that such that it comes out very well. To me, as you are talking, I did not see it very well. The other is when I looked at the problem statement, you majorly brought out the facts relating to the problem. The practical issue was coming out very well. And I imagine that PhD, every practical problem has a theoretical explanation. And that lineup, to me, did not come out very well. If it is in a document, well and good, but I kept on asking, what is the real problem? Is it the practical problem? Stating practical problem, and without a stronger theoretical issue, to me, I think you may need to look at it. It may be my own problem, or it could be that maybe it is missing. Look at that one. The other is theoretical framework. And I heard you very well saying that you adopted the theoretical framework. Is it that you adopted or you adapted? But what I kept on seeing, you introduced a new variable meaning that you wanted to improve that model. Does it remain a theoretical model? It is now a conceptual model. And then when you look at this model and you look at the coherence of your background, does it replicate the background? I think you may look at that one also. The philosophical assumption, I heard you clearly saying that you are going to use, you are using structured reality. And then I kept on imagining, you had a conceptual issue. Does structural reality really bring out that? Do you think this ontological position will help you really to address the problem you have at hand? And again, if you mention that few studies explain how scalability is done, and that's a problem. How is the process? Does ontological reality really bring out that kind of argument? I went ahead to look at what you mentioned about the face interviews that will be done. Then I think you may need to realign that so that you bring out both the perspective from structured and unstructured reality. For me, that's what I thought. Chair, for the interest of time and other members to come in, let me submit from here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Let us go to Professor Pincho. Professor, please.
Thank you very much, moderator. Colleagues, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Charles for his good presentation. I think that he has some substance that he has put across to us. I, however, have some two areas which I would like to address my mind to and call upon Charles to think about them. Majorly, I find that his methodological section needs some more consideration. In his presentation, Charles seems not to be very clear about the distinction between method and methodology. He seems not to be very clear about research design and research approaches. In his presentation, he has mixed them up. When he's talking about approaches, he's calling methods. When he's talking about design, he's talking about approach. I think that it just has to come out very clearly, read a lot about that, and be able to know the distinction between research approach and research design, the difference between method and methodology. Maybe he will have to repeat himself and we hear him more clearly and see how to help him better on that. But there's a confusion in his mind about all these things I've talked about, which if they don't come out clearly, then he may not be knowing exactly where he's going. Secondly, under data analysis, Charles talks of using descriptive statistics, but it doesn't tell us which type of descriptive statistics he will use and why he will use them. Equally, he talks of using inferential statistics, but it does not tell us which type of statistics he will use, why he has chosen those particular types of inferential statistics to use, and who are the authorities that support his choice of those techniques to use. I think this has to come out clearly in order to make his work, more authentic. Thank you very much. I submit.
Thank you so much, Professor, for those comments. I think, Charles, you are noting most of the comments. Maybe can we take more two before we ask Charles to respond? Okay, Charles, I think you could, if you have any comment or to respond, there are some in the chat, you could first deal with those ones before we move to the next series of views.
Thank you very much for those valuable comments. I will attempt to respond to some of them, then others. I think I will. I will go to consult and see how we can realign all of them. The first one was Gideon. Thank you so much for the elaborate comments. The first one was about why I chose agriculture, and that is not coming out. I think it's something that I should be able to share. We have a detailed analysis of that look at scalability in the different sectors, but what is notable that agriculture and some other few sectors are one of those that are really lagging behind in terms of the number of digital innovations, interventions in terms of digital innovations. It's one of the lowest from the statistics that I have, but also because agriculture is one of the key sectors for some of the developing countries. So that was a motivation, but it was informed by the statistics which showed that it's one of the least in terms of the number of digital innovations that have been implemented. Yes, they have taken note of the issue of the central argument, which said is not very clear, and I think we'll be able to we'll try to look at it and see how that can come out clearly. I think we need to rephrase and see how this can come beyond just discussing the practical problem, as you mentioned. Yeah. Yes, the one on the framework. Yes, I think adapted might be more appropriate. I think I need to realign my write-up. Adapted might be more appropriate because of the introduction of other variables there. I also take note why you're guiding that it needs to be linked to the background. So I think I'll need to look at that and make sure that in the write-up there's coherence. Those variables, there's a coherence with the background to it. Yes. Yes. Professor Picho, yes, very. I think I could have mixed up on some of my statements as I was mentioning. Issues of methodology section, issues of research design, research approach, using them interchangeably, confusingly. I take note of that. I think the bigger issue it could have been in the process of speaking. I've mentioned put them interchangeably, but I tried to align them. Yes, and then the issue of descriptives, I think I will try to align this and try to give a justification as to why those specific statistics have been chosen. Yes, and also giving the authorities. Thank you very much, Prof.
Okay, thank you, Charles. I know as we continue, there are even others on the chat, but I think Dr. Edabo had raised his hand, then Bernard Wabkara. Yes. Dr. Paul?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I want to appreciate Charles for his presentation. I just want to get clarification from Charles. He needs to explain for me, clarify. One, he used the research hypothesis, and he has also talked of using quantitative. In quantitative, he also mentioned he will only use one design. And if you look at the design he chose is a design that goes for both qualitative and quantitative. So how will he address that? That is one thing I need to know. There's also the issue of using close-ended questions, interviews, rather structured, and at one time he talked of not using the descriptive statistics. How will you achieve or establish this? Because we know qualitative statistics will basically lead you to look at the interviews, and those structured questionnaires. Then quantitative will go for close-ended questionnaires. Are you not mixing now at that point when you say you are not going to use, you are only going to use one, and yet you have already clearly put that you are going to also have structured interviews? How will you quantify them? How will you present them if you're not going to use their qualitative? Then there's the issue of talking about the Krigis and Morgan table. You did not tell us exactly. Why did you choose this Krigis and Morgan? Because you must come out at this level to really break it to the reader that yes, apart from other methods of sampling and all that, I would basically do this. So that has to come out why you went in for Krigis and Morgan. Though Morgan, yes, is a renowned author, 1970, and here we are in 2022. We need really to come out clearly and more convincing for a reader who is more possessed of the current situation and the more updated sampling techniques. And the other thing I need to get clarification, Charles, you brought out the issue of validity, and the validity you only concentrated on content and construct. And I was wondering how will you first of all establish the two? And if you're going to deal with the content and construct, what about the criterion and face validity? How will you confirm that? Then it also goes to the issue of reliability, the same. How will you do that? It needs to come out clearly in your presentation so that the reader or the follower will understand better. I still agree. In fact, the Prof has already put across the point I wanted to highlight. There's the issue of statistics. You mentioned about descriptive, and you were also talking about correlation. The question I'm asking is correlation. What is this correlation? And I guess you were talking about inferential statistics, because the moment you go for hypothesis, then you are talking about now inferential statistics. And which one is this specifically? Because inferential statistics has got different tests that we need to know, so that your study will be anchored on, so that you don't mix up. The last one, I still want you to give a clear picture. You went in for research hypothesis. Why didn't you have used the both research and null hypothesis? I just need this explanation. Thank you.
Thank you. Bernard.
Thank you, Prof. And good morning, members. Thank you, Charles, for walking us through your work. It's a journey we are all in there. I have two things that I'm putting across just for my observation. Number one, listening through your presentation, my thinking of your topic now is scalability of digital innovations among smallholder farmers. I think everything else is just a backup, but your attention is really on scalability, digital innovations among smallholder farmers. Maybe the seniors can guide us more on that. Two, in the background, I think we are advised to keep track of our dependent variable, if I'm to use that word. So scalability, because there was a mix-up of scalability and then digital innovation. And for me, they kept switching. Maybe we should really put attention on that. And then on the contextual factors, at one time I was even tempted to think maybe we should look at contextual factors and scalability of digital innovations. So I think the emphasis is usually on the dependent variable, which we are always advised to put track on. The second one, Charles, is the problem. Out of my own experience from my advisors, the problem you really have to come out and say it. Scalability, is it there or not? I think that's the first statement, or something you always have to work to do with it. Maybe it is there, but not enough. So for whatever position or problem we identify is to demonstrate the why and some evidence why you are saying it is there or it is not there. Otherwise, the other bullets you had in the problem statements, like my advisors have mentioned, are symptoms. They are not the problem. So, but this is what we have to keep anyway, learning from others. Otherwise, thank you. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Bernard. Dr. Evelyn.
Yeah, good morning to everyone. I just want to also join the other speakers in terms of appreciating Charles for his presentation. Maybe, Charles, you'll need to go through your pages 27 and 28, because in page 28, you talk about mono research. And yet in terms of page 27, you clearly show that you're going to use mixed methods. So you need to be clear in terms of what you really mean by mono research method, as opposed to what you actually put in terms of your approach. You have issues of quantitative statistics that you're hoping to get through questionnaires, but at the same time, the qualitative, which talk about either through semi-structured and also structured interviews. Now, in terms of your page 32, you talk about sampling, but in terms of sampling, you're only focusing on the aspect of quantitative data. You've actually not shown how you're going to get the qualitative data in terms of the numbers you're going to interview. So you need to check that on your page 32. And that still goes throughout. Even if you look at page 35 in terms of mitigating strategies, you talk about rescheduling interview. And yet from your submission, you indicate you're going to focus more, just as previous speakers have noted, on quantitative. So please go through it and then have consistency, because either, as you note, your research is more of quantitative, but being supported with the aspect of qualitative. But then in terms of your submission, in terms of your sampling, and also in terms of the approach, you indicate more that you're going to do quantitative, yet the elements of interview etc. in your work. So you need to check that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I think, Charles, you can see the issues, and it goes back to, I think, if I can summarize what most of the questions have been highlighted, you need to really see how you position this study in terms of philosophy, and then basically now flow to the methods. And also with the methods, the methodology, they must be consistency. I think there are issues of contradiction in terms of the research approach, the research designs, then the methods, and then the techniques. I think that's what most of the, and I think you need to pay attention to that. Maybe we could get another round of comments. Oh, Charles, you have something to say about this?
Thank you very much. Yes, because I've been reading this and I've noted the inconsistencies. So in fact, sometimes I was wondering how did that come there? But I think the consistency started from part of what the other comments have come in about the methodologies and all that. Having something different in my mind, but I think I've written something different on the paper. I just wanted to thank those who have every person who has given the comments, and I wanted to just make some statements on Bernard, the comment by Bernard. Thank you so much for that observation on the importance of me keeping track with the dependent variable. And I note that, yes, there's a lot of contextual factors, there's a lot of digital innovations being mentioned in that. So I think I'm going to look at that and see how to realign that. And of course, what you've already mentioned, others have already mentioned about the problem, why it needs to come out. And I think the biggest issue that I've noted, especially on the comments that have come in, is on the methodology, where there's no consistency, and especially like where I mentioned here that I will use only quantitative, but now there are aspects of qualitative that are coming in. So I think I need also to really, I'm going to see the possibility of revisiting this, and what I foresee from the recommendations of the presenter, from the comments that I've written, I think I will need to reconsider some of these methods and approaches. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let me invite Professor Laura. Professor Laura.
Thank you, moderator. I hope I can be heard. Please confirm.
Yes, yeah, clear.
Okay. Thank you, Charles, for your presentation. I add my voice to what has already been raised, but for emphasis, I'm just going to bring up some of the issues that have already been raised. Please share your conceptual framework. Charles? As you do this, your study seeks to explain scalability of digital innovations in the agriculture sector. I was excited about the topic, and so I was eagerly listening, waiting to hear a lot about this digital innovation thing. But you left me yearning. Up to now, I have not understood what you mean by digital innovation in the agriculture sector. Maybe you can just quickly enlighten me on this. What is digital innovation in the agriculture sector? Do you have, maybe you give some examples, then I'll follow with my other questions.
Thank you very much, Prof. Digital innovation in agricultural sector. Here we are looking at, I'm trying to look at ICT innovations like applications, possible like applications that support things like marketing, access to markets, access to weather information, access to seeds, inputs, access to pesticides, and including applications that actually support monitoring of agricultural inputs, or even where it comes to livestock, monitoring of the health, tracking, all those digital innovations that relate to it.
So in other words, you are focusing on those innovations that help, excuse me. Excuse me. So in other words, you're looking at those innovations that help in communication, right? Am I right?
Yes, but that is in part. But there are others which is beyond communication, like if you are tracking or in the actual process in the management and production.
Okay,
but
fine.
A good number on communication.
That is something for you to go and refine, okay? It has to come out clearly. Building on that, you're looking at smallholder farmers. How do you define a smallholder farmer?
Smallholder farmer, one at most 2 acres, 1 acre below. But I think I will need some authority to.
All these are pointers for you to go and refine your conceptualization. Okay, you need to get a proper definition that is supported with, authentic, should I say sources, authorities, okay? Now, I'm looking at Uganda. When you were presenting your respondents, I was very, attentive to hear, where are you going to get these smallholder farmers? Is it the entire country? Are you looking at a particular region? First answer that.
Yeah, they are across the country, but of course, when you ask now, I think maybe those are some of the consistencies, because what I was looking at, that I will engage the vendors, people who provide those technologies, and then the farmers that they work with. But the focus was really on the providers of those technologies.
So you're looking at
consistency.
Are you looking at the vendors? Are you studying the vendors? How many are they? Do we have these people? How many people do they reach? Anyway, these are things for you to think about as you refine your conceptualization. Because I'm looking at your DV, yeah? It's your DV that drives your research. it's your DV. When you talk about scalability of digital innovations in the agriculture sector and in the sample, you're talking about smallholder farmers, you're talking about the vendors. These have implications on that nice diagram that you have there. By the way, someone already mentioned what you have there is a conceptual framework. Okay, why I needed this to come out clearly is because when we get to be realistic, the smallholder farmers in Arua district where I come from do not have access to the apps. All those, the toy framework, I'm wondering whether that toy framework, TOE framework, can apply to those guys. That's why I asked how do you define smallholder farmer? But then you're saying you're talking about the vendors. Still, these vendors, the vendors of what? Of the app, of... Anyway, you need to convince me on scalability of digital innovations in the agriculture sector. Someone already asked you, why did you pick out the agriculture sector and not other sectors? Digital innovations in the agriculture sector and not other sectors. As you explain this, you really have to point out those that are applicable. First of all, why the agriculture sector, and what are those innovations that are really the digital innovations that are really helpful and in use in the agriculture sector. Someone already asked you if the digital innovation is already in existence, because you're talking about scalability. When you say scalability, in my mind, I thought you're saying that these innovations already exist and maybe they are in small what? Should I say small levels, or you just need to blow it up. So if that is the case, my confusion then was, why bring in intention to scale? Why? You need a proper justification why you bring in that variable intention to scale in your study vis-a-vis your DV and its practical applicability in agriculture sector, and for that matter, the smallholder farmers. What is that justification, and which theory informs the introduction of a mediator variable in your study? These are things that you should go back and think about. Just go to your purpose of the study. Purpose of the study. To develop a framework for assessing readiness. That is the purpose. In my mind, I said, okay, it means you're investigating the readiness. Go to the research question. What contextual factors influence scalability of digital innovations? So the research question and the purpose of the study, I got confused. Go back and look at those two. Then methodology, so much has already been raised, but just an emphasis, the use of qual and quant. It's not a matter of just saying, I'm going to use questionnaire, I'm going to use interview guide. You must have a reason why you need to have these. You must have a reason why you need to use a mixed method approach and not only quant or only qual. It must come from, right from the word go, and then we must see these embedded in your research objectives down to the methodology. So it's not a matter of just saying, I'll do interviews, I'll do a questionnaire survey. What is the purpose? What is the purpose? And in your write-up, for every, in your write-up under methodology, for every statement that you make, you must have the answer to the why. I'm going to use critical realism. Why? I'm going to use largely the quantitative approach. Why? I'm going to use this category of people as unit of inquiry, as unit of analysis. Why? I'm going to use a descriptive statistics. Why? I'm going to use a correlate. Why? The why must come out very clearly. In your book, I'd like to stop there. Some of the things I had noted down have already been mentioned. Okay, and then, let me just this last quick one. Sampling techniques. Do not be confused about determination of sample size and how you select the sample. Determination of sample size has its own criteria. There's a lot talked about this, a lot that has been said about this, a lot of techniques out there. Go and read about the different techniques for determining sample size. Out of them, pick one with a clear justification. After that, you then now go to sample size, sample selection. How do you select your respondents? How? There are various methods out there. Go and read about them and then come up with what you will use with a clear answer as to why that particular one. Thank you so much. Over to you, moderator.
Thank you, I think, Charles, you're getting the comments. Again, also reflect. Look, you are still looking at the. In your study, you are talking about developing countries. Are you going to look at all the countries or what? I don't know. You should also think about that. I see also there are comments from our mentor there. I don't know whether Professor Joseph Ndai could be able to add your voice.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you very much, Charles, for your presentation. I hope you are hearing me from that side.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes. Charles, I have few comments. What I sent in the chat room is not really a comment as such, but Lola asked you a question about the digital innovations, and I saw you struggling, and I wanted to give you some of those things so that even when in the future, when you start talking about digital innovation, especially in the agricultural sector, those are some of them, and actually many of them are in use, even in Africa here. So you could look at them. But have comments on a number of things, but I will just limit my comments in the interest of time. If you go to your slide number 3, just take me to the slide if you can, and I will come back to that slide 18 as well. Slide, I think it was slide 3, if I'm not mistaken. On slide 3, is that 3? That is 2. Where you wrote 3, I see background 1, 2, where you have a 3. That one. So is it 3 or 5? Although down, what I see down on page is totally different from what you have here. Now, if you look at that slide very well, I think that's where you read the aspect of why. Because you said that in the current studies on scalability, the current studies on scalability have not fully explained why majority of digital innovations targeting smallholder farmers in developing countries continue to struggle to scale. And the current study intends to close this gap. Right. So I was wondering, the gap, is it the gap of struggling? Is it? In fact, for me, the issue here is about problematizing and the construction of literature. You know, you need to problematize the literature very well so that you create space for your study to contribute. So the gap must be very clear here. Why? And when you look at the question why, because it features on a few slides here, this also has a philosophical implication and methodological implication as well. Remember, the question that we're trying to handle is the question of why. Why? Now, that takes us to the slide number 5. Incidentally, maybe before, before you go to 5, go to 18 so that you see the inconsistency between this slide here, the why, and slide 18. This why? Now here it is the what. The why and the what. So are you handling both the why and the what? And somewhere I saw the how also coming in. Again, having a bearing on the philosophical perspective. And I think that's where somewhere you say, I'm going to use a mixed. Then somewhere you say, I'm using the positivistic. And when one looks at the hypothesis that you have, the picture is very clear where you are going, right? But somewhere you bring in the why, the how, the what, right? Which has a philosophical perspective as well. So let's go to slide number 5, where you talk about theories, I think. The theories, that is 5. Where you have 5, background of the study 5, yes, that's the one. Theoretical foundation. The current study is anchored, right? So in other words, it's anchored in those 2 theories, Rogers and that one, right? Then you say diffusion of innovations. The theory will, there's that 3rd bullet there. Can you help me read it? Will
the theory will.
Don't worry about you can correct it, but tell me what it means.
The theory will help the researcher to understand key players in the social system and their role in the process of scaling up digital innovation.
And their role. So is that now the innovation theory? Is it the Tonaski and the Fisher? I have a feeling that you need to read these theories very well and see how you are mixing them up. Again, mixing up these theories has a philosophical implication. Let's proceed to the conceptual framework. Go to the conceptual framework. I can't remember the slide, but you can take us there. You know where it is. Before that, there is the other slide that has that one, although I can't see those letters very well. Every theory that you see is based on a number of assumptions, and I'm not very sure whether you have actually gone through the assumptions for the diffusion of innovation theory and your TOE framework, right? But maybe you didn't think about them before you started combining the two theories. But let's go to the conceptual framework, your conceptual framework. Yes, I had difficulties understanding this. And for me, whenever I see a diagram of this nature, of course, those who have the mathematical mind, they would rush and start developing a number of equations to represent this, which is also right. You do not necessarily have to have a diagram. You can have an equation or equations. Right, I was looking at your operationalization and I actually wondered how you are going to measure some of these things. First of all, the conceptualization, operationalization, and measurement. Look at where you have vendor organizational. What do you call vendor organizational? I don't know even what that variable is. Then you say formal and informal linking structures. Then in communication processes. I think I'm reading what is there. Then you have a size, Slack. Then you go to external task environment as your variable. Then you have industry characteristics and market structure, technology support infrastructure, government regulations. Then look at that mediator variable, intentions to scale, linked to vendor organizational, where you have informal and formal linking structures. So I have a feeling that you may have to sit down, rethink the conceptualization, and maybe what is important is for you to read the two theories again and see how you can pick those particular constructs. But most importantly, your context, sorry, your introduction section or your background lacks context to help us understand how these things actually work in the agricultural sector, where you want to undertake the study, where your testing ground is. So, one just sees these coming up in a diagram and wonders where they're coming from and how they are related to the sector which you are studying. Now, lastly, I want you to think, and possibly during your free time, you could do this. Look at the link between philosophy and theory. I don't think you've thought about that. The connection between philosophy and theory. Yeah, there is an obvious link between those two, and they are related actually. If your philosophy is very clear, right, and you are telling us that you are either taking up the humanistic or naturalistic or interpretive, right? That means, again, I'm taking you to the aspect of the qualitative kind of research, right? If in your background that aspect comes out, right, then you know very well that the theory you're going to apply must take you into that direction. So I see some bit of a problem there. Your assumptions, whether epistemological or ontological, the ontological and epistemological assumptions, right, linking to some of the issues that my colleagues have already mentioned, like methodology and methods, although in your case you tend to confuse all those things, right? You should find a way of, at least if one goes through your first slide, second slide, after the last one, there are no contradictions in your work. I submit here, thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Joseph Ntai. I think those are very fundamental issues. Charles, actually, if you look at that theory, the innovation theory, it's a good theory, by the way. But I think, like Professor said, you have not really contextualized that theory. That theory gives you 5 issues. Basically, how innovation is cascaded out, or whatever you're talking about scalability. It talks about early innovators, talks about innovators, early adapters, early majority, late majority, and the laggards. And I think if you contextualize that theory properly, it could sort of provide you a direction on which you can be able to examine how innovation is scaled. So I think you need to read that theory critically. I think the theory is good, but the process of you internalizing the theory is something you might have to properly look at. And also now, and I think the critical issue also you need to really carefully deal with, because I think even the earlier comments, if you sort out the philosophical issue which Professor has told you, I think it will become easy to deal with the contradiction between eventual methodology and the methods. I think that is very critical. I must thank Professor, our mentor, for that submission. And I think also Professor has given you on the charts, and I think there are many other questions which are some suggestions which are there. So I think you need to really develop a focus of your study right from the background, then go through, then conceptualize properly based on a critical theoretical issues, because the theories really support you in the process of conceptualization, getting critical elements. Because even when Professor Laura was asking you about your focus of your study, what you are mentioning actually is not in the conceptualization. So I think you need to get a firm ground, then put a proper philosophical underpinning, then go to the methods and that kind of thing. Again, unless there's anything, maybe I want to ask Charles to maybe say 1 or 2 things, because actually I see our time is almost up. So this is how we shall be closing. Charles will make maybe some few comments what you think based on the comments which have been given, and then we shall have Professor James make closing remarks, and then Sylvia Arakit will close with a word of prayer. So Charles, can you, if you have anything to say?
I think I want to thank everybody who has given the comments, and I have been very attentive. I've been recording every comment, and it is the work I'm going to do. And I believe this is going to help me to streamline and refocus my work. I'm glad that I made a presentation on this forum. There's no way I would ever hear some of those comments, but I thank everybody who has been able to give me these comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Professor James, you could make some remarks as you're closing.
Thank you, Associate Professor Ketcher. Thank you very much, members on call. Professor Ntai, thank you very much for this platform where our students are presenting their work for support from each other and their supervisors and other members on call. Thank you very much for this work. A journey of 1,000 kilometers begins with one step. So we are not the first one and neither the last one. We all have gone through this journey and members are on to follow suit. So take note of the comments, work on them, come back and present, and we are here to support you. So I thank you very much, members, for your comments and for listening in. I think I'm humbled that we get such turn up every morning and we listen in and contribute. And we learn and relearn in order to learn. So thank you very much, members. I wish you a good morning and a happy Independence Day. Thank you. Over to you, Professor Ketchup.
Thank you so much. Happy Independence to all of us. Yes, Livia, please. Is Livia Arak still there? Sylvia, okay. Bernard, you could close the word of prayer. Wow. Who can volunteer to close to the word of prayer?
I think we can pray.
Yes.
Mighty and everlasting God, we thank you for such a time like this that we have spent together learning and listening from one another. We want to say thank you. We give you all the honor, especially for our mentors. We want to thank you for them, that they spare their time in these weird hours of the day and they listen to whatever ideas that we have in our minds as students. As raw as they are, we are grateful that these kind people are there to guide us at free cost. We pray for long life upon their lives. We pray for their needs to be met. We pray that well with them, well with their families. But I also want to pray for my fellow students. We know the task ahead of us is not a simple one, but we pray for grace, we pray for strength to be able to move on. As of today, we've seen a number of us coming and improving and getting better and better. I believe that by more grace from you, we'll be able to move even more strides. I want to thank you very much. And as we depart from this meeting, may your grace go with each one of us. We want to thank you. We give you all the praise and all the honor. In Jesus' name I have prayed. Amen.
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 Girls,
Amen.
and share the screen.
And Charles is still in the mood of presenting.
Happy Independence.
Happy Independence, people.
Charles, we have a script to you. You can unshare and go and work on the comments.
Happy Independence Day. No one has invited me.
No, we are looking for where you are. We are coming to where you are.
We were expecting invitation. We were expecting invitation from you. We were expecting invitation from you. Oh, come to Arua, and we have it in Arua here.
Hey, I'm going to look for you when I'm next there.
Please, don't miss that.
By the time the independence will be done, that's a long distance.
We carry it forward.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, that's okay. Thank you very much. Enjoy your independence and be safe. Don't look for trouble. Have a good day.